I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the shared territory of the Snawas and Qualcomm First Nations, and we thank them for their stewardship of the lands and allowing us to live, work, and play and learn here on this beautiful island. As I said, the budget is the key topic for this evening, and I'm sure Mr. Amos will review where we've come from in February to where we are now today. I will turn it over to Mr. Amos.
Thank you, Chair Flynn, and good evening, everyone. Just to remind folks, this is our regular board meeting. As the chair indicated, it will be recorded. I'm going to go through, obviously, a series of slides that will form the presentation. Both the recording and the presentation will be on our website as early as tomorrow for those that want to just review some of the comments and questions that might have come up over the course of the evening. So sharing my screen. Everybody knows the drill by now. How are we doing seeing that? Thumbs up.
Good.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, it's all good.
I apologize in advance for some of the screens to provide some context. Some of the print will continue to be very small, but I'll point out some of the areas that I'm looking you to focus on. But I do apologize for sometimes that small print that strains the eyes. So tonight, obviously, it's a single item on the agenda. The agenda is the budget for 25-26. Going forward, in a week's time, the board will, if you want debate, will get presented with the budget that is included in tonight's conversation. And then they have the choice to pass the motion in one sitting or in multiple sittings if they can't get unanimity on the motion going forward. And so, yeah, budget process to date we'll talk about some of the survey results that went out. We'll talk about the operating grant and other announcements. I'll try to include some of the conversations around the facility planning, the capital funds, as well as special purpose grants that wrap up some of our programming. We'll talk about cost pressures. We'll talk about recommendations that senior management is going to put before the board, and then we'll talk about kind of that next steps. Like I said, the next week as it if there's any questions that come from it. So many of you have, and again, I also forgive me for those who have sat through multiple sessions. You kind of know the sequence of events here. Really, I'm trying to speak to the public that hasn't necessarily engaged as much as some of the stakeholders and partners that have been involved in these other series and other gatherings. So really, this slide is really indicating that it is a cycle. It starts, forgive my phone, it starts in January with the planning for the following year. We've gone through that wonder in terms of what the budget will look like. We've talked, it kind of escalates up to the point of in March, we get the grant announcement. I'll speak to that. We're in the cycle right now of the April to June, again, having spoken to partners and the public and the board and management, we have those discussions and then we come together either April or May, depending on the implications of the budget and the revenue calculations. This year we chose to delay this meeting until May, when we had most of the information at hand. The planning cycle continues through July through September as the enrollments get finalized. We know that in September we do an enrollment count that feeds into the recalculated grants in October through December. And again, we always do 2 budgets per year, the annual budget, which is effectively the preliminary, that's based on projections, where the funding we think is going to be, where our enrollment is going to be. And then once that information is solidified in October through December, we have until the February the 28th to pass an amended budget with the new information. So we opened the survey, I think, in February this year, and again, just to show context, this really is just about acknowledging those that we can't always get to, and those that can't always have input because of time schedules, running a family, that sort of thing. And so by and large, the parents are the ones that we are seeking information from. Up to this point, we've had engagement from our partners, our teachers, and and the union, the association's representatives. Likewise, support staff through their executive and their QP members. They've provided some input in multiple sessions, and school administrators through the Principals and Vice Principals Association and other district level meetings that we have with them. We certainly hear from them and our partners with those folks as we lead through these discussions. But by and large, the parents are the big contributors through this process. And that's really just to acknowledge the fact that they sometimes can't get the schedules don't always match up for these meetings and these evening meetings. So 91 this year versus 55 last year. A good engagement, if you want, from the parents as well as other participants. Some of the things that we've heard, again, recognizing we're trying to sort of, we know we want to hear what's going well for people, but we also want to know the challenges that sometimes we're not always aware of or we're not attuned to. But from the working well, we hear that there's committed and caring educators, passionate, committed, and supportive of the students' learning and well-being. Positive school environment. It's been appreciated, the welcoming, inclusive, and community focused, and that students that generally feel engaged and a feeling of sense of belonging. Program acknowledgement, the trades programs, the outdoor ed, ROAMs, field trips, project-based learning, highly valued. It's also obviously acknowledged from the parents that are the preponderance to this survey. The opportunity to give feedback is appreciated, and there's a recognition of the board's challenging role as they ultimately have to decide what we want to do with the budget and how to respond to the budget gaps, as it were. Likewise, valuable cultural learning opportunities, programs. It was pointed out cultural bins, land acknowledgements, and year-end celebrations are appreciated for providing meaningful exposure to the Indigenous culture and history. There was an area for comments on facility conditions, and again, recognition that they generally are clean and well maintained. However, if we had full funding and if we could, we would obviously modernize as much as we can, but recognition that the bathroom updates that we've been working on in Bolinas, and that'll continue through at KSS at Qualicum Secondary next year, are appreciated. Again, modernizing our facilities as best we can, knowing that we can't always get full funding for replacements of these buildings, but we do, by and large, have a mechanism to find projects that can help extend the life and modernize some of these schools that we have. Some of the challenges that were observed: academic concerns, concerns expressed over literacy levels, classroom supports, and academic rigor, needs for better communication. And we've seen this one a few times now, a number of years. And again, it's really recognizing that communication is key for parents to be able to not only be attuned to some of the board decision-making processes, but from the academic sides, from the learning environments, from the strategic plan, those sorts of things are just always wondered about the communication. And again, we continue to work on that through some of the software that get purchased and rolled out into the system to better communicate with parents, whether it's transportation, whether it's programs that are coming up, whether it's key dates to remember, that sort of stuff. Financial concerns, and again, always that frustration. It's acknowledged that funding priorities don't always align with what our stakeholders, what our partners bring to the table, and there's always going to be that balancing act between a finite pot of funding and a limitless, if you want, limitless the nature of programming and what we can offer. So there's always this balancing act. It's just acknowledge that not educational spending is sometimes thrown up as, why are we spending in these other non-educational areas? Well, it's just because we have to. We have to maintain our buildings. We have to clean them. We have to run buses. They're not necessarily directly linked to classrooms, but they do have educational value to getting our kids to and from school in a safe and healthy manner. And likewise, their area of EA supports and what they bring to a classroom and classroom environment. So that's again, that's the nature of the survey. It goes into our thinking, it goes into the strategic planning that was created a number of years ago. And again, it's good for us to touch base on this to make sure that we are hearing the community that we serve, and the kids, and again, all our partners that we engage in education with. The operating grant was the provincial budget leads this discussion. The provincial budget is it's created in generally February of every year. It starts with the throne speech. It leads into the provincial budget. Within 2 weeks, the ministries get their funding envelope or their funding budgets. So again, this was really about how the budget or how the BC government was telegraphing, if you want, the economic environment that they were facing their budget. So we heard back in the fall, the provincial budget had a deficit of 9.1. That deficit has grown since that time. We again, the climate carbon tax kind of thing was rolled back, and that created another $1.4 million pressure on the budget. But again, this is what the BC government is working within. Likewise, spring of 2024, the federal immigration policy changed, and it had an impact on not so much our local catchment or our local economy and our local enrollment, but it certainly is impacting the provincial picture when it comes to the number of families moving into BC, and likewise the families bringing children. And so it has had pressures on some other school districts well beyond ours. Global tariffs, again, we can't turn the news on without seeing the impacts of that. And so again, recognizing it is an ongoing issue, and it remains to be seen when it will be resolved. But again, we know that this is the environment we're working with, and the BC government is obviously, as well as the federal government, are having to deal with the impact that it will have on not just the national economy, but obviously the BC economy. Again, unknown the impact, but we just have to recognize the environment we're working in. So then, following obviously the throne speech, comes the BC government. Within the minister's letters, which are posted online, they sort of indicate what each ministry is tasked with, what each minister is tasked with. And so what we read in there is that there is a renewed commitment to providing safe and healthy schools. The expansion of the child care program continues from the capital perspective, and likewise some pilot operational programs that are being handed out, as it were. So from our side, we have minor capital that's an annual cycle that our director of operations manages the ongoing 5-year capital plan kind of thing, in terms of what do we need this year for minor capitals. And so last year we had some, like I indicated, we had some washroom improvements in Bolinas. We're going to extend that to Coqualicum this year. Likewise, HVAC upgrades. There's always an idea, or there's always a plan that we need to upgrade them on a cyclic basis in a cycle. Again, we can't do all schools at once, but we can get to 1 and 2 with each year in our planning program. Likewise, the playground equipment, that was a new program within the ministry's capital program, was created about 5 years ago. We don't always get it. Not every district gets it. And what they're doing is obviously funding accessibility playgrounds. And so once every maybe 2 years, we will get one. We apply every year, but like at the end of the day, we tend to get one every 2 years. And so Springwood is the elementary school that will be getting a playground expansion this year. Likewise, Likewise, within the capital programs are the major capitals. And again, we don't generally, we as in this Qualicum School District, we generally don't have any need for capital projects. We don't fall within the seismic issues, although that resonates every once in a while. We don't fall within replacements necessarily. Our buildings are in relative good condition relative to other school districts that have much older and much more aging facilities. So generally speaking, we don't get a lot of major capitals. However, this year we did, the last couple of years, we applied for and did get replacement for False Bay School. So that's going forward, very early days. But again, as of last month, it was approved, and it's going through in planning and then eventual capital replacement within a 3 years or 4 years if you want cycle. Likewise, the childcare projects were announced about 4 years ago. We got the Arrowview Elementary built under this program. We applied for a couple and received one for Qualicum Beach childcare facilities to go on, obviously, Qualicum Beach's site. And so that was approved early in April. And so again, planning is underway planning is underway. And again, recognizing none of these things get built overnight. Childcare is probably a 3-year, but a 3-year cycle by the time it opens. False Bay is about a 4-year cycle by the time it opens. But all good news when it comes to these things. A lot of work, but again, appreciated that we can get these projects approved and build for tomorrow, as it were. Generally speaking, the special purpose funds are funds that are usually created by the ministry for specific purposes. In the past, what I'm showing you areas that we've received funding in the past, classroom enhancement funds that was used to address the class size and composition language restoration. Learning improvement funds is a bargain funds that supports EAs, giving them more time to work with the school teams. Community link funds to address student vulnerability, French funds to complement the French immersion and core French programs, and BCT introduced about just before COVID, about 4 years ago now, to enhance First Nations transportation needs. And so what the budget let us know was early learning, family affordability, and food issues continue to be a priority. So early learning programs have been committed. So we've got a couple of, we've got an ECL, Early Care and Learning Funds, that is supported through the early learning initiatives. We've got Strong Start, we've got Ready, Set, Learn. And so those programs will continue for at least another year. We've got a Seamless Daycare that's committed for another year. And then we've got the family affordability, which is the big one that was announced 2 years ago. And then the National Food Program that dovetails with the work of the BC Family Affordability Food Program. And so in lockstep, the two of them are obviously funding the food programs within the schools. The third thing that gets announced during that budget cycle, we talked about capital, we talked about special purpose and priorities, and also obviously the big one, obviously that is the operating grant announcement. And so truly the federal or the provincial education funding is now at 7.2 billion, big number. What you're hearing lots of information on is the implications of what that percentage of the total budget is compared to past years. Education used to be, I won't say it was first, but between health and education, they were 1 and 2. But over the course of time, health, because of our aging population, health has definitely expanded to I think it's about 40% of the provincial budget, where we used to be 30%. They've grown to maybe 50% of the budget, and we've shrunk, as it were, to something less than what we were. But again, it's all good. Provincial education funding is now at 7.2. So So this go around, no new funding for the no new funding is in the operating grant beyond rolling in the labor settlement. And I'll show you in a couple of slides what that means, but it effectively is taking 550,000 that we got as a special grant last year and increasing the per pupil funds accordingly. And so really that those monies have been returned to the grant to enhance the per pupil. That really is just paying for the last year's salary increases. There's been some small additions because of those salary settlement costs embedded in the classroom enhancement and the community links because there's salary implications in those two funds. But there is no recognition of a replacement cost pressures. There's no other inflationary factors being addressed. There's no benefit costs that are being addressed in escalations that are being addressed. So it continues to put pressure on our budget. Again, I'll share some slides on how those pressures have been over the course of time, but no new money for that area, which continues to put pressure on other areas. More districts are estimating slower and declining enrollment growth. Unique student need categories are actually expanding somewhat against the provincial totals. And likewise, because of that, and again, I will speak to the funding protection response, but more districts will be receiving funding protection and enrollment decline supplements than in prior years. This year, there's 17 out of 60 districts are going to receive this buffer grant, including ourselves. I'll tell you that the difficulty when you do these teams is you can't look into the eyes of your audience. You can't see your audience in terms of the nods. You're so focused on this and you get no clear. Anyways, that was my commercial break for a bit of a breather.
No feedback of a
Yeah,
cast and
limited, absolutely limited, except for the ones I pin kind of thing for. Anyways,
running from the room with our hair on fire, that kind of stuff.
So moving on. So the enrollment is obviously one of the pressures that has a direct correlation clearly to the funding. So this is a slide that we shared back in March and April in terms of how our enrollment has changed over the course of time. So between 2014, which is when we hit the low point, if you want. Our enrollment was declining right up into that point, and as a result, in 2014, the board of the day made the decision to close schools. They closed 4 schools. Since that time, we've rebounded somewhat, and the rebound has come from our regular programming as well as our expansion of the alternate and our DL, or our online learning as it's called now. And so you can see the blue bar over the course of time has gone up, gone down slightly when COVID came along, and those kids effectively went into, again, it's not a direct correlation, but effectively they expanded our online learning. And then also during that time, our online learning had met the needs of the kids going forward. The provincial mandate was to expand online learning to that point, of which we responded at the same time. Coming out of COVID, obviously kids returned to the bricks and mortar. The regular programming continued to increase over the course for the next 3 years. And then we plateaued in about 2023. And if you recall back in September 2024, we kind of discovered that our numbers were coming down. And again, this was just the recognition that increase, the effects of net migration was being felt, the impact of these large graduating cohorts were not being met by the kindergartens coming in. So we had a net decline within our cohorts also that we're having to face. So that trend is now going to continue for the next couple of years because we've still got these large grade 10, 11, 12 cohorts that will exit and will graduate if we do our jobs right. But we have a smaller kindergarten class coming in. So it's unless we get the kids moving into the district that have already started into the system, i.e. families moving to us with 2 and 3 kids that are already fully engaged in grade 1 through 11, we're going to be seeing a decline in our enrollment. And so what we've projected, as you can see, our regular had 4,200 plus or minus. We're predicting about 4145. Our alternate program is generally stable right now. Our online learning continues to suffer some declines in enrollment, and we're going to see that particularly in second and third counts that occur in February and March. But again, what you're seeing is us having to absorb about 97.5 FTE loss in our enrollment. What that means, and this is the one I apologize for earlier, so you can't make the comment of my eyes hurt. So what I'm trying to show here is the fact that 97 kids has an impact on the enrollment. But as I alluded to earlier, there are some buffers within the grant that help districts absorb some of those losses to get their ships in order over the course of time. So as I indicated, rates have been adjusted to include the labor settlements. So between last year and this year, the rates went up about $100 per FTE in the standard programming. And then so what you're seeing is the dollars per FTE that these kids generate to create a grant for us. So last year, our enrollment-based funding was about 38.477. Because of the increase, and again, it's really just to understand that the labor settlement fundings were the wage increases and some of the benefit increases that were put into play in 24-25, but continue for another year, clearly, because the rates don't go back just because they've had labor settlement. The rates continue to go up. And so the funding that's been put into the system has to be continued over the course of time. So yes, our grant only went down by 200, but our kids went down during the same cycle. So these kids, 72 less kids, didn't generate as much funding, and so about $200,000 loss in our enrollment funds. Likewise, as I indicated, that because of the enrollment decline was greater than 1%, so between 1 and 4%, they give you 50% of the net loss. So because we declined by 1.66%, 72 divided by the 4330, they gave us $130,000 as a supplement. Other items that are ongoing, obviously unique student needs, which include special ed funding, English language learners, Indigenous education. Because of that loss in student count basically in the unique student needs, we're declining about 300,000 in that area. Salary differential is sort of is just the adjustment that we may be higher or lower than the provincial average when it comes to our teacher salaries, and so we're given a supplement for that. Likewise, we're given a supplement for our unique geographic factors. We went from a 5.5 for an anomaly, if you want, in the Neuse Bay. And so that was taken away effectively, about $500,000 net loss in that area. But ultimately, within the unique geographic factors are heating, cooling, small rural schools, sparseness. I'm just trying to think of some of the other elements, remoteness, locations, etc. Anyways, about $5 million comes to us in that format. So in the supplemental funding, we lost about $800,000. So when the ministry looks, oh yeah, and then adding to that, the labor settlement funding that was given to us as a 1-year grant, that value gets rolled into here. So we've effectively lost 550,000 in a supplement because it's given to us in increase per pupils. That's $550,000 less over year. So what the ministry looks at, and this is where the funding protection kicks in. So the funding protection is a protection against a funding decline that's greater than 1.5%. So we have to absorb the first 1.5% in loss of funding, which is about $700,000. So because from the table, and again, this is all very trying to be transparent here, but on table 7, if for those interested, table 7 of the grant calculations for this year, they calculate our actual decline in funding of about 1.28 million. So we didn't have to absorb that. Effectively, we absorbed the first 700,000, and they will give us the funding to supplement the difference. And again, so that's about a $600,000 supplement, because our funding actually decreased by 2.7. We absorb 1.5. They're basically going to give us 1.2% over the course of the next number of years, as long as we need it. Knowing if our enrollment continues to decline, obviously we will continue need to get our ship in order over the course of time. But in the meantime, we've got a $500,000 or $600,000 supplement to support the decline. That supplement means that our decline with all in is about 840,000 against the operating grant in September. We add those, and I'm just going to go back for a moment. We add the decline for second and third counts for online learning, and that translates into another $225,000 loss in operating grant. That all rolls into a $1.065 million operating grant reduction. And again, it's all based on these 97 kids, 97 and a half FTE, as well as other areas that are hitting us in different directions. And again, talking about the unique geographic factors. So that's the operating grant. So over and above the operating grant, that's the 1.65. We've had this conversation for the past 2 years about closing some of these rental sites that we have, Craig Street Commons and Qualicum Commons, as 2 areas that were supporting us in an operating fund, operating revenues that were coming in at about 400,000. But because of the capital needs for these sites, we've made the decision to close them. And that's a good thing, because it won't continue to be a risk going forward that if anything fails on these sites, that we would be left holding the bag on having to fund any capital needs. But in the meantime, we have to have a sort of a 1-year reset of our revenue that's associated with those tenants that are on those sites. And again, so what we're going to be basically doing is a $400,000 write down or right sizing our rental income because of the closure of those sites. There are some expenses that are linked to those funds that we'll get into shortly. But again, recognizing that from the revenue side, we're going to lose about $400,000. We've talked about the investment revenues. Interest rates have been declining in the last year and a bit. And so again, really, it just means that we have having to right size our investment revenues that are embedded in our operating fund. So about $200,000 will hit our revenues. The sum of them too is about 1.665 in operating revenue losses. And this is before the cost escalations that we'll speak to shortly, and any other requests that might come forward. So again, that's the implications from the revenue side. From the cost pressures, we've talked a couple of years now about the pressures of benefits, the pressures of replacements. And so again, all I'm really doing is leading into those discussions that continue to put pressures on our budget. Benefits we've talked about over the course of maybe 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 years have been fairly stable over the course of that first year. You can see that they haven't gone up that much. And in fact, in a couple of years when they made some adjustments in the pensions, the employer contributions to pensions, there was a period of time when the pensions were not fully funded. And so they made some large increases in the employer contributions. When those funds became funded, fully funded, as it were, they were able to make some those reductions. So that was a gain for the districts. And from when it comes to the employer costs, it was a gain for the employees when it comes to the employee contributions to those benefit plans. And then just basically there was some additional cost escalations just on the benefit formularies, pharmaceuticals, drug companies, and all these other things were started to put pressures on those benefit costs, recognizing that the benefits are pension, our extended health, our dental, as well as the statutory deductions that employers have to bear the costs of for EI and CPP and WCB. What we've seen in the last 3 years, particularly, is post-COVID. Obviously, there has been an escalation of on the benefit carriers in terms of the usage of these benefits, as well as escalation in the benefit coverages that were part of the collective agreement settlements that occurred 3 years ago. And again, so that's what you're kind of seeing here, is we're on the final year. 24-25 is the final year of the collective agreement settlement funds, and so that's been putting pressure on the benefits and the employer costs of benefits. And as the note up here, some of the cost drivers within benefits are within our influence, and I'll show you a slide on our WCB. But for the most part, we don't have control over these other settlement funds or the pressures that the benefit carriers have on, obviously, the escalating costs of dental care coverage, the escalating costs of pharmaceuticals, the escalating costs of paraprofessionals in the massage therapists, that sort of thing. So those costs don't get borne by the carrier. You may not be surprised by that. They are borne by the premium rates that they charge the employers in this case. And so those costs have been going up. You're seeing as a percentage of salaries back here as a 25.8 of salaries. Now we're talking 26.9% of salaries. That alone you can see is about a 2 point. And again, I'm just talking since 2019, 2020 has increased about almost $2 million. And again, those costs generally are not funded by any other mechanism than by local funding that is embedded in the operating fund conversations. And so it has been putting pressure on other areas of the budgets and continues to put pressures on the budget. In the small area that we do have influence, WCB rates, again, this is linked to how we do against the provincial numbers and how we do against how we've done over the course of our own time. So the blue area is our sector. The blue area is the provincial school districts, 60 school districts, and how they stack up against the sectors that WCB covers. As well as every district has a surcharge or a premium, if you want, that is how the district is responding against the sector, as it were. And so there was a time where we were growing at a higher rate than the sector. And then the last couple of years, we've actually made some gains in how we monitor health and safety of our staff and employees, and so our surcharge hasn't been as high, and provincially it hasn't crept up at the same rate as it has in the past. At the end of the day, these are small wins, but they do make an impact on the amount the budgets are having to bear. Replacement costs is the second pressure that we're having to feel. And so again, we've talked about this as the last 4 years, we've talked about this at length in terms of the impact of replacement costs, the impact of staff taking more days off. And it really is about how we view our health after COVID. And again, so I think I've got it on here. And yeah, and I'm just going to put this one up. The replacement costs continue to increase because we become more health conscious. These are staffing days, these are sick days, these are other impacts that put the pressure, because over the course of time, we are taking more time off in between, or to heal ourselves for health days, for sick, for COVID, and the impact of how we look at taking those days off. That not only are we taking more incidences off, but we're also taking more time off with each incident. So it really it becomes an issue. And like I said, these are not funded costs. These are things that we have to bear within our operating grants, within other areas of our operating revenues. And so you can see that over the course of 3 years, if you start in 1920, and why I've got a star here in 2019, 2020, obviously that was the peak of COVID. We were closed. Obviously, there was an element of we were closed for 2 months, or working from home, as it were. So people weren't at the end of the day, we weren't needing replacements during those times. So that's why you're seeing a sort of a decline in that. Honestly, I don't know what 15, 16 was about, but again, what you're seeing is there was a replacement costs were down that year. It could have been the right sizing of the district. I'm not sure, but a point I'm just really articulating. Oh, it could be the strike possibly. During that period when we were closed during a strike period, we obviously weren't calling out as often. All that's saying is the replacement costs have been escalating since COVID, particularly since 21, 22. You're seeing this escalation over the course of time. There are some wins, and I'm looking at this one now. I'm going back, sorry to confuse, but in reviewing the year over year, and so again, I'm looking at teacher sick days taken between September and April of each year. It's not going up at the same pace. Same thing with CUPE hours. It's not going up at the same pace. And again, we recognize that these costs will likely, now I'm flipping, will not go down, but all we're hoping for is some stability in terms of what that replacement cost is going to be over the course of time going forward. Right now, we're kind of chasing these costs. We're chasing the benefit costs. We're chasing the replacement costs. We just hope that at some point they will stabilize and we can kind of make some gains in other areas. So bringing forward that operating revenues, 1.6 that we talked about, that's the operating revenue losses that we're seeing. And again, that's made up of grants, that's made up of rental revenues, that's made up of investment revenues. Add to that the estimated additional benefit costs in the range of 250,000. Add to that the replacement costs over time that are escalating of about 75,000. I haven't spoken to this one, but it's again what we recognize that there's a not just global, but again you're seeing it more and more in some of the districts that are in not just, well, in the province. Again, there's issues of cyber attacks that are impacting school districts. We are not alone. You're hearing it in other provinces. You're seeing it in other sectors and in other industries. These cyber attacks are getting more and more pervasive, and they're getting close. They're getting very close to home. And so we sort of undertook a half-year cybersecurity software in December to protect us for now when we're asking for the continued support for that software going forward. And it's about 100. These are not small ticket items. It's about $150,000 annually, and so we're asking to have that put into the budget to support the global risks that continue. And what this allows us, because there's other items that are occurring provincially. There's what's called this. It's almost like a retainer fee that the province has created under the guise of Focused Ed, which is a provincial software consortium that we as school districts belong to. And so the last couple of months they've talked about a retainer that's been put into place, basically a vendor has been handed a contract that allows them to intervene if you are being attacked. It allows schools to to call them up and get advice so that they can sort of be the first call. This cybersecurity software is one step beyond that. This is security that we need as a district to protect ourselves, so that we don't need to call the vendor to support us when we're being attacked. This is more preventative than anything. Likewise, I've talked about the facilities that that we're needing. Because we're closing these sites, they come with some shutdown costs, what I call carrying charges and disposition charges, that we need to build a bit of a fund within our budget, recognizing that they may or may not come to fruition, but we need to set aside some funds to address these facility needs should they come up. Likewise, and I'll talk about this again, why we're going down the direction for some of our response is because our district's supply budgets and our school supply budgets have been cut to the bone, for lack of a better term. And so what we're trying to do is create additional space in the budget to put some funds back to these areas that need addressing. These increases, obviously about 825,000, put a further gap in our creating a further deficit, if you want, of about 2.5 million, resulting in decreased revenues and increasing costs. So it's a big gap to fill. The next slides will sort of talk about how we think how we're recommending to the board to respond to that. But I'll leave it at that for a moment if people want to absorb that. Seeing no nods, we will carry on. There will be an opportunity for questions as people sort of absorb this and recognize where we're going with this, with a response. So as I've talked about, in the past, our responses were generally to go after non-staffing areas. Our first go-to was supply budgets first. And again, so that's what we're recognizing, that we've cut as much as we can in our supply budgets to the point of now we have to start adding back. So we've done that first, and then staffing of second. And when we reduced our staffing, we tried to keep it away from the classroom as much as possible. And so, as I said, our school supply budgets were the first raided, is for lack of a better term. The district planning funds were reduced at times. Our equipment replacement funds, when funds were found through enrollment growth, we were able to put aside some money for White Fleet. We were able to put additional money aside for IT replacements. And so what we did going into this year, this budget cycle, we eliminated the White Fleet. And so again, our equipment replacement budgets are the areas that we go to when we can't, when we don't want to impact staffing. And likewise, perpetually ongoing, we do efficiencies. We check on efficiencies. How well are we doing? How can we find some reductions in our utilities? How can we find some reductions in our fuel costs for our buses by creating some efficiencies within our bus routes? We look at our replacements when it comes to the IT department kind of thing, in terms of the number of computers per student that we have in our classrooms. All of those things are looked at in terms of how can we find some efficiencies in those areas. So that work continues. We continue to look at ways of addressing our replacement costs. Like I said, we look at our WorkSafe. How can we make our sites safer so that we don't have escalating WorkSafe costs? Those things are ongoing. There are definite wins in the area, but it's not something that we necessarily want to expect over time, nor are they, because they will come and go as time goes on. So we don't want to necessarily depend on those areas all the time. So when we did reduce our staffing levels, when that was necessary, we generally tied those reductions to our enrollment declines. And so as I showed on that graph earlier, KEEP, which is our was known as our distant learning. Now our online learning program, and our PASS Woodwinds, which is our alternate programs, as you saw on the graph. Those, over the course of the last couple of years, their enrollments have been going down as these kids have found a place in our bricks and mortar schools. And so as the enrollments have declined, we've adjusted our staffing levels at those sites in those programs. And so it's not to say that we haven't addressed staffing. We have when it comes to the enrollment in areas. Likewise, when it comes to in September, when we found out we lost quite a few kids in our special ed department, our special ed unique student needs, inclusive education. So we were addressed that by holding back some of the EA assignments that were directly linked to the number of kids that we're servicing. Likewise, and this is an ongoing, this isn't new, but classroom divisions get adjusted according to the size of the school. And again, it's all linked to the classroom, the size of the division, the classroom, class size, language, and composition kind of thing. So if we can reduce a division in a school because we lose enough kids that make it that we're able to, then we'll find some divisions that we can, if you want, not maintain. And again, it is all recognized that it's on account of the student enrollment in that site. Likewise, the flip side of all that is as the school expands, as more kids come into an area, into a school, particularly at the secondary at this point, we accommodate it with adjustments in the classroom and the enrollment staffing that we put into those sites. And then likewise, after all of those areas, we look at the areas when it comes to staffing that are not affecting classrooms. And so we look at some of the programs that we're running that don't necessarily have a direct impact on enrollment. Sometimes it's the international program kind of thing we're looking at. We would look at right sizing the district according to the needs of the program, justifying whether we fill the positions that become vacant due to basically attrition oftentimes. And so we basically are trying to justify whether we fill or we don't fill some of those areas, as well as the administrative positions that are managerial, that are supports within the system for other areas. The operative word here, this is different. So this year, as you saw by the magnitude of the deficit, is different. And it's forcing us to respond in a different manner. Having gone down these, the buzzword about 5 years ago was low-hanging fruit. That's long since passed. Again, what we've done in the past couple of years have gone to harder areas to where we can find the efficiencies, to where we find the reductions. This is the first year that we're going more aggressively into the staffing domain. And so what we've shared, this is a slide that we've shared out with our partner groups leading up to this discussion. So this isn't a surprise for most of the individuals on this call. It will be a surprise for the community that are now being included and the public that are now being included into this discussion. So again, recognizing that our revenues are down 1.665. We've got a pressures of expenses. And again, that's the benefits, that's the replacements, that's the needed asks, as it were, of about 825, which makes our deficit about $2.5 million. What we proposed last month to our board and to these partner groups that have, like I said, have had this information shared with them for a number of weeks now. We were proposing some adjustments in our teachers' assignments with looking for reductions of about 11 FTE. In our support staff, about 9 FTE. In our administrative positions, about 3 FTE to get to the $2.5 million. And I put these current FTEs so you can see context to the number of FTE that are within each category. So there's about 265 FTE teachers. So that equates to about 4% loss in our total complement. 191 is about 191 in our support staff is also about a 4% decrease in our staffing complement, and then 49 is in our administrative. And again, this number recognizes 5 trustees, exempt staff, and principals. a net loss of 3 FTE, which is about a 6% decline in FTE against that category. What is new is us sharing out this information. And so this is how those numbers break down, still at a fairly macro level, but again, to give some insight in terms of where these reductions will be felt. And I do ask my senior leaders to weigh in at times. I'm going to try to address most of these myself, but absolutely, if there's some questions in terms of the getting into the nuances of these changes and the impact that may be felt, I will lean on the senior team to kind of provide a little bit more context to where these numbers will fall out. So again, from the collaborative and needs response team that was introduced 2 years, trying to think, 2 years ago, and had some staffing implications that we were able to add back. We're asking to basically discontinue that staffing. So it's about a 2.6 add to going into last year that we're going to reduce and we're going to take back. French immersion divisions, and this is really enrollment related. Again, we're seeing less numbers coming in, so we're reducing the enrollment divisions, 2.0 FTE. Other classroom divisions at different levels, secondary and elementary, about a 2.5. And again, these are directly attributed to that 97 loss of kids. Teaching and learning team, eliminating the team. And again, this is a team of 3 individuals that serviced the schools. Most of their department is basically being eliminated. And again, this is because we have to find the reduction somewhere. Likewise, we've got a curriculum support team. We're indicating that we're going to reduce the allocations. I think we currently have about 21 FTE distributed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Assistant Superintendent Wilson, but it's about, and what we're really doing is reducing that allocation to the schools by 1 FTE. That makes up the teacher complement of about 11 FTE. When it comes to support staff, and know that our support staff cover quite a few areas. They cover obviously operations and maintenance, which includes custodial, it includes grounds, it includes transportation, it includes bus drivers, it includes trades. And so what we're asking for reductions in the operations and maintenance department of about 4 FTE. Because we've got 2 custodials on the facilities are being closed, they are going to be linked to the savings against that $400,000 in revenue, but there is an ask from the operations and maintenance for an additional 2 FTE. Inclusive education, again, recognizing that we don't know what the numbers of kids will look like. We're estimating that from that other grant reductions, we're estimating that there will be a net loss of about $300,000 to $400,000 in our supplements for unique student needs. So we're trying to find those values in the EA area. And so we're basically reducing the number of hours to the schools that are being allocated for inclusive education. And likewise, for the first time in a while, we've actually started looking at the clerical and library assistants hours and rebalancing the allocations at the school level. We did some work on comparing how we allocate our sites against other districts, again, on the island effectively. And there is some room to reduce the allocations. And again, we recognize that this is hard on everyone, but it is an area that that we were staffed a little bit more liberally, that we figured we could probably find some savings across all the areas. And again, so the sum of all that is about 9 FTE in support staff. On the administrative side, we have a program manager that we're deciding not to refill. This is one of those areas that, based on attrition, a resignation, that we're not going to fill that position. And likewise, there's a couple of principals at the school level, one is retiring, one is resigning, and we're opting not to refill or not rehire those two positions. So that gets to the 3 administrative positions. The sum of that is about 2.5, and again, there's balancing that will go into when I craft the budget going for the board next week. But point being, that gets us to the $2.5 million need. Questions? I'm going to take this off share, but I can absolutely go back to other slides if individuals want to ask something pertinent to something. That way we can actually see faces.
And I'd ask people to use, please, the raise hand function, because we have 30 participants and it's hard for me to see all screens, but I do see the MATA president, Mr. Wood.
Hi, Eve. Thank you. Again, apologize for my camera. I worked on it for 5 or 10 minutes, but it seems like it's going to require a little more analysis. I've got a number of questions. I'm not sure where to start. They're related to different slides. How would you like me to proceed with this, Eve?
Oh, start at the top. We'll see how we can manage the slideshow with it. Start at the top.
I want to thank Ron for the presentation. He answered a number of my questions through the presentation, so that will make this somewhat shorter. So thanks, Ron, for that concise report. I guess I just wanted to. I know there was a slide that looked at the replacement costs for CUPE and MATA, and I'm pretty sure administration doesn't get replaced if they're off sick. But was the increases that are seen in both MATA and CUPE, are they not also seen with administration in terms of relative days being increased that were off?
Yes, absolutely. And internally, I do keep another sick days based on our exempt staff, our principals, vice principals, and administration. And you're seeing the same thing. The number of sick days in our administrative staff is going up. And so, but to your point, there is no cost to it. It only becomes a cost when it becomes a long-term sick leave. And that way, I shouldn't say long-term, it becomes a longer absence, as it were, when we make that decision to replace or not replace. But you're absolutely right. Administrative, not cost, but the administrative days for sick leave has been going up pretty much at the same rate. Administrators get sick also.
Great. Oh, thank you. I just wanted thanks for confirming that. The next slide was the one that talked about increases in expenses. I think that's the
benefits or replacements.
No, I think it was in the 825,000 increase in expense.
What kind of expense? Sorry, what kind of?
It was expenses? It was outlining the different expenses that equal that 825. Sorry, yeah. I missed
no worries.
Yeah,
somewhere around here.
The difference between operating cost expenses and ongoing expenses at 825.
It was like these. It was the new ones.
I'm getting warmer. Bear with me. I can't. No.
No.
Oh, back up.
Well, not this one. You're talking about the budget response. Okay, hang on. There it is.
The two.
There, that one. Yeah. This one here. Yeah, I was just curious if those. I just heard a word that. What was that word again? If these come to fruition, or I'm just wondering is there are these all these expenses? Are they like guaranteed expenses? Or is there a priority to these? Like,
no, I think I hear what you're saying.
Obviously, like the benefits, the additional benefits are probably the priority because you can't really not pay those, but you could potentially not supply the full 200,000 of district and school supplies? Like, is this all kind of like a confirmed sort of piece, or can some of these things be decreased supposedly if monies don't come in?
Based on what we know in our revenues, and these again, so these are the pressures that we know about. There's other things, obviously, there's other risks that we obviously bear over the course of time, but these are definitely the expenses that we know about. And it would be, and it's, if you want, it's our recommendations to put some of these things back into the system. Again, you alluded to the district and supply budgets. I guess if it push comes to shove, if there was an appetite or a demand by the board to say, no, we can't do it, then we would have to find that. But really, this is coming to the board as a recommendation, knowing that some of these costs, to your point, we have to bear regardless. We can't do anything about the benefit escalation. We can't do anything much about the replacement costs. These other ones are things that we would recommend highly for the good of the system. The cybersecurity software, the facility needs. We need to find some money for the budget to cover off these unknowns. And likewise, the district and supply budgets is really just a recognition that we at some point need to put that money back because this what we're hearing from the schools is they are suffering the loss as they've borne the price of these reductions over the course of the last 2, 3, 4 years. And it's time that we find placement within, unfortunately, the staffing side, because none of these things are getting funded in any other manner than through reductions in staffing. It's just the nature of the beast. 85% of our budget is staffing. And when our supply budgets used to be a higher percentage of our budget, and our replacement costs were a lesser percentage of our budget, our benefits were a lesser percentage of our budget, those things can only be funded through staffing reductions. There's no new monies. And again, I'm just trying to point, press home the issue that these are the recommended approaches, knowing that absolutely some of these are still estimated. We haven't fully got our benefit rate increases. We've got it for our CUPE staff. We haven't got it for our teachers and administrators, but I'm anticipating increases in those areas. There's other areas embedded in this that we don't know about, and I can't, and aren't being factored into the budget. I talked earlier today. Can't remember where, but we were talking about funded increases for exempt staff and funded increases for the salary negotiations. They're not in here because they haven't been announced, and so we're all waiting for the mandate of the for the provincial bargaining. That may have, I won't say it's going to provide any relief because there's going to be a corresponding cost to any of the revenues that they're going to supply. And in fact, what we've seen over the last number of years is this recognition that even with the funds that they release is not enough to cover off fully the costs that we're having to bear. Long story short, again, I'm trying to get to the point that these costs are these pressures are recommended to be put into the system to absorb some of the issues that obviously different departments have felt and the budget has felt.
Sure, and they're probably likely prioritized as listed.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Well,
Okay.
I guess
yeah.
to your point, they're
I-
prioritized for me, but
Yeah.
but absolutely everybody in this room may prioritize them different.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And you know, I've often talked how the funding formula for the ministry is extremely flawed. And I won't go on. That's not my soapbox to go on to that area, but it is obviously flawed.
Dystopian, what was it? A dystopian?
Yeah, functional budget
Dystopian.
dystopia is what I
There we go.
call it.
It's
Functional
the new
budget
one.
dystopia.
Are you
Yeah.
putting a copyright behind that?
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully it can catch on. No, it's free will. Use it at free will. Now, I guess my last question then just referred to the classroom divisions get adjusted. It was one more toward the end, I think. No.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right there. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and I was just want to understand when you say classroom divisions get adjusted. I know there's always been a priority of this district to try and keep classrooms and a recognition that that class size makes a difference. And so I guess the concern is when classroom divisions get adjusted. I guess how I read that is that they may be, closely maxed out in terms of class size. And I'm just curious, has the district planned for, enrollment of students as the year progresses next year? Because we know it's often difficult to have a maximized class of 27 or 29 in this case, or 30, um, and then students move into their catchment area, and is there going to be room for them or not? And I'm just wondering if that has been taken into consideration. I haven't seen the class numbers, so I haven't seen that yet. Usually we don't see that till September when we have a better idea, but I'm just curious as to whether those divisions, when you say classroom divisions get adjusted to accommodate, was that adjustment to increase them in order to lessen teachers? And will that leave enough room for students that may move into this area in the next year?
I'll start, and Associate Superintendent is free to weigh in. Generally speaking, again, with our enrollment decline, we know that when our enrollment, say we lose 20 kids, and it equates to about 200,000. Am I getting my numbers right? Yeah. Obviously, those kids are not going to be in every classroom. They're going to be spread out around. And so there is an accommodation that those 97 kids are going to be all around the district. And so what we're trying to do is, when we know that, as we know the projections, because at this point, the projections are old. Our projections were based on February's information, and even then they were old at that point. We know that these projections change with time, and we try to accommodate those changes so that we have a little bit held back to accommodate additional divisions. And so there is always an amount that Associate Superintendent has just as a buffer to make so that she can respond to some of the pressure requests from the secondaries, from the elementaries as needed. So we always leave some seats available if you want for the kids coming in. We know that we have to do that. We don't want to have to create a new division in September just because we get 2 kids. And so we have that in mind. We've always done it that way. But we've always at least tried to find placements in the divisions as best we can to accommodate the losses in the enrollment without pushing the class size to the max by any means. And so it's done with thought. It's done with knowledge that kids will come, but kids will also leave us between now and September. And so what we're trying to do is balance the information that we have at hand to accommodate growth if it comes to us, and if it comes with new funding, even better. But we do appreciate the fact that it is a moving target.
I can't see Associate Superintendent Ms. Wilson, but do you wish to add to that?
I think Secretary Treasurer Amos has covered it all. The only thing that I would add is that we're carefully monitoring our current enrollment based on what registrations we have. We're really cognizant of making sure there's room, for example, within our downtown area, when we think of like that corridor between Arrowview, Oceanside, and Springwood, that there's room in the primary years, there's room in the intermediate years. I think what Matt maybe also talking about is that the board in prior years has asked us to look at smallest class sizes in the grade 8s, which has been a transitional year. And that's been around the 24, 25. We're not doing that this year. We're not maximizing the classes. We're leaving room for growth, because we know it can be a timetable scheduling nightmare for our secondary schools if they have to put another cohort in there in September. So we're being really mindful. There's continued communication between our schools in terms of where their new school configurations are. And it's a live document that we make sure we're keeping an eye on.
Thanks, Ms. Wilson.
thank you.
Yep. I see Trustee Austin, then Dr. Torrey.
Okay, thanks. Peter, did you have a response to what's been said now? Because I have new questions to ask. But if you were responding to something that's been said, go ahead for it.
It's just a little add-on, and if you recall the slide where Ron was pointing out where the staffing reductions had come from by category, you'll notice that in regard to teaching staff, they've come from different areas, and really the reductions in regular classroom staffing in elementary, I think, would be minimal. Where the belt tightening has occurred there is more in secondary. So our secondary principals have had to work very hard, and they're to do their timetables. They're being more, I think, tough with their choices around what electives run and don't run. It's an environment that would be quite, or decisions that would be quite familiar in other districts. We've had given them some latitude in the past and asked them to push harder this year and try to be more efficient if they possibly can. But to answer your question, I think is having space in every grade in every school in the event that there's new enrollment or movement. That's top of mind. When we are talking about secondary, they are in the process of building their timetables. If we start to see new enrollment coming in, we may have a chance to respond, but as you know, once the timetables are built, it is fairly tough to add divisions once we're up and running, and you have to kind of look at different ways that you can accommodate new students. However, we are anticipating that enrollment's going to be flat or declining. So anyway, crossing our fingers that kids land where we have space, and that we have space where they want to land. So.
Thanks, Dr. Torrey. Trustee Austin, and then Trustee Young.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much for that, Ron. None of this is very pleasant, and it is difficult. Having said that, now I have a couple of questions and some comments. My first comment, just very quickly, on I think the last page or close to the last page, where you're talking about the response and the number of teachers, support, and admin that are being recommended. And you did mention the percentage. Maybe before this goes up on the on our webpage tomorrow, maybe you could just add what those percentages are. I know people could do the math with the numbers you've given us, but just make it easier. Throw those 4, 4, and 6% in there.
4, 4, and 6. That's a good idea.
That would be great. So now I have a couple of questions. One is, will any of these reductions that are being proposed, will they affect any of our electives, in particular things like music? That's one question, then I'll have a few more.
I'm actually kind of looking at, I can answer that there is no plan for it, but I'm sure Associate Superintendent Wilson or Superintendent Torrey can expand on that.
Through the chair, I can, no, the prep time is allocated to schools. So we think about the elementary levels. In most of our schools, the prep time is given through either PE and or music, or they have a conversation with their staff committees around how they want to do prep time. I know one of our schools does French as a second language as our prep time. So that's still a decision at the school level. Our elementary schools, I have looked at what their teachings are, what the postings are, what they are doing. Music is still part of elementary, and PE is definitely still part of elementary. I want to just mention one of the categories that Ron talked about in terms of the curriculum support. That has been reworded over the years. It used to be exploratory discovery all those kind of words. We've called it curriculum support for the last number of years. It is not the learning support. I think what Ron was curious about, it is curriculum support. There's no longer that 1.0, which was directly towards the elementary schools. What we were finding is that principals and vice principals were doing what they needed to do at their school to do, whether it was enhancement in terms of literacy or whether it was ADST or doing an exploratory, and that allowed them to have one more exploratory than the number of learning environments they had. That's what that staffing is, and so that might be what you're thinking about, Trustee Austin. That's no longer in the system.
Okay, but so I guess what I'm hearing is the exploratories, given these proposed reductions, should not really be affected. Is that what I'm hearing?
It means that they would, if there's 3 grade 6, 7 classrooms, there will be 3 different exploratories that the teachers would share their classes together. With that, a little bit of extra staffing. In the past, they've been able to do 4 for those 3 classrooms.
Okay, so is that telling me?
It'll be a little less. It'll be a little
It
less.
will be a little less.
It'll be a little less.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But not in music.
Yeah, music was one of, but music is a big one. So yeah, so the music is great that that's safe, and hopefully we can still retain some sort of semblance of strong exploratories. My next question is, what did you mean, Ron? I think I missed it when I thought you said eliminate the white fleet, and I thought that can't be right. So what were you talking about when you were talking
Eliminate
about
the white fleet replacement fund.
Thank you. That's the piece I missed.
If
Well,
only,
the whole
no, I
fleet,
won't
so
say
we're
if only
going
we
anyway.
could.
Let's eliminate the white fleet and make
Yeah,
them
if
walk.
only, yeah, I won't say if only we could. Yeah, we could kind of replace it with bikes or something, but that wouldn't go very well. No,
Yeah.
eliminate the equipment replacement fund.
Or the white fleet. Okay, that makes far more sense.
Yeah.
My next question is around the NRT, the NERT. There's been a proposed to reduce that by 2.6. The staffing that we put in last year's budget, which I believe the line item was $246,000 in around that amount. Is that effectively eliminated the NRT line in our budget?
Yes.
Dr. Jory?
Yeah, it has eliminated any kind of school-based
Extra.
release time to support it. We did add some there to get it off the ground. In my strategic initiatives budget, there still is some money that can be allocated towards release time. And so what we're hoping is that it can carry on in limited form with the TTOC replacement costs being the only expense there. So the amount of money spent on it will be greatly reduced, but we still think it can live on in a limited way just through those replacements now that people are, kind of getting the gist of it.
Okay, thank you very much. And my other question is around our accumulated operating surplus. I haven't heard anything about that. Do we have none? It's not being, and if we do have any, it's not being introduced into this budget.
Yes, we do. We we do have some. We've got 1.2 in operating surplus, of which 300,000 is committed to programming district Indigenous education that we're going to be spending this year. There's a link to the bus software that's going to be spent this year. But what we have to work with is that $900,000 that isn't otherwise apportioned out. I'm not recommending us tapping into it for the simple fact that anytime you tap into it, you have to find the reductions a year later anyways, because all you're really doing is deferring it. Because you're putting the money from a surplus into the budget, the following year it has to come from the budget again. So I'm not recommending us using it. I'm of the mind that we are as close to red line in the operating reserves as we can get. Again, understanding the purpose of these funds is the rainy day. And I don't believe if we can plan appropriately like we are doing today and this budget cycle, that we can address the rainy day by dealing with what's in front of us, as opposed to putting off and putting off and putting off by tapping in to a reserve fund that is rapidly declining, diminishing. Yeah.
Well, because
no-
we're losing students, which is the active piece of the funding. And
Yeah.
just by filling in with surplus money and we continue to lose students, that doesn't put us ahead. That puts us going backwards.
Yeah, and that's clearly I mean, that's the intention of the funding protection model. Again, is recognizing that we've talked about the fact that a student in a perfect world, 20 kids, we would lose $200,000, but you can't get it all from staff from an instruction classroom kind of thing. So it's recognized that embedded in that per pupil funding is all those supporting things. In the first year, you might be able to get to a class, but you have to eventually start stripping away the services that go into it. And so we are at the point of we're having to slowly strip away some of those service costs intentionally, because those kids by all definition are not coming back. We are in a declining enrollment that's projected to decline over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It'll slow down, the decline will slow down, but to be honest, next year the decline is actually projected to be bigger than this year, because we have a larger classroom or class graduating currently in grade 11. They're going to move to grade 12 next year. They will be to the tune of 400, and with the most recent projections for kindergarten that Associate Superintendent Wilson has talked about, is our kindergartens are coming in at around 220 at this point, not even the 250 that we've seen in the past. So
Okay,
so the message being, we need to address it now.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I just wanted to bring it up because I hadn't heard of it at
fair
all
enough,
in our budget discussions, and I thought it should be touched upon. And then my last comment, or more, is a question. I would like, and I know you've mentioned this before, just contact you and you'll get it to you. So I personally would like to see a detailed line by line proposal of this budget with all the areas broken out into their functions and the different statements. And I know that you have said in the past that if other people are interested in that, to just get a hold of you. So that's what I'm asking for. Thanks.
I'm putting, this is how responsive your secretary treasurer is.
You
So
got
here's
it.
the 4.1 on here. So this will be shared out. This is how it's going to look. But absolutely, what you'll see in the budget package, and I'm pointing to the 4.1, 4.7, 4.6.8. Yes, the budget presentation that you'll get in your board package for next week will include a briefing note with the essentially sort of where the fundings are, some of the informationals. You'll get a little bit more information on, and I think you're asking for a more detailed account of this last page of the staffing. Is that what you're looking for?
No, I'm looking for a detailed budget, a line by line budget by function by.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You know, so that you can see the breakout of it's not just an overall heading that says administration. It says principals. It says vice principals. It says governance. It says, exempt staff, that kind of thing. It has, for the operations and the maintenance, it has a breakdown of this is maintenance. This is, all of that sort of thing. I would like to see that detailed budget prior to next week. And then, and thank you very much for being so responsive. You flipped that up there. Look at that. You were talking, answering people's questions, and doing math.
I aim to please.
So thank you.
Unfortunately, this is one of those things where you're trying to be as responsive, recognizing what's in front of us, recognizing the magnitude. Again, we know that there's individuals attached to this. We do recognize, we don't lose sight of the fact that this is impacting our staff, the people we work with, the people we see every day. This is hard stuff. And the last 10 years that I've been in this district, we've luckily had a little bit of growth in our enrollment to manage the cost escalations, to manage some of these things. But when you have escalating expenditures and declining revenues attached to program, attaching to decisions like closing of schools, and they're closing of facilities anyways, which are done with intention. When you have these difficult discussions, we know that this is difficult decisions that the board has to make. I mean, we as staff are doing our best, as we've talked about it, of how we present proposals to the board. They're not without thought. They're not without understanding of the implications in the system. They're not without the understanding that we're working not just the 5 senior team members, but the 45 principals inclusive, including the managers, that have to work through the nuances of what this means to their departments, to their schools, to how they run their schools. Superintendent Jory spoke of the pressures that the secondary principals are dealing with in terms of the scheduling. So we know this comes with a lot of pain. We're trying to obviously do as much as we can this year so that the pain doesn't elevate for the future years. But again, we recognize that it's all about choices and how we utilize the funds we have.
Trustee Young, and I have Matt. I might insert Trustee Kellogg in ahead of you, if that's okay. Trustee Young?
Yeah, a lot of the things that Trustee Austin talked about, and some of the things that Mr. Amos talked about. Yes, first of all, Mr. Amos, thank you very much for this presentation. I think overall, I wanted to speak to the document that I prepared for the meeting on April 16th. And I'm looking at what my priorities were, which is basically that students have to be at the center of every decision that we make, and that we need to be fair and compassionate employers. You have recognized that this is a multi-year problem, and I think the financial plan certainly shows that. I also think the thing that we haven't talked about a bit is how unsettling the whole environment is in terms of the economics. Trying to create a budget in a time when we don't really know what the cost pressures are going to be in terms of tariffs and so on and so forth. It's really, really difficult. So I really appreciate this. To Trustee Austin's point around exploratories, I really don't want to lose any, well, I don't know what we're calling them, but those things that happen at elementary school that prepare kids for high school and keep them in school. Of course, I was a music person, so I'm like all over music. But also, if we can find a way of doing like a stream program, I think these are really important things. That would be my number one thing to schools is, please, elementary schools, try and work this out in some way. The NERTs. I think Trustee Austin has asked for a full evaluation of the NERTs. I'm not willing to go forward in any way, shape, or form with NERTs until we have a fulsome evaluation. I just, my jury is out on this. Beyond that, I think advocacy, like, this is really hard, right? Because the province is not going to really respond to us in a positive way. They've shown that over and over again. We've had constant stuff from all of our partner groups, you know, please fund this, please fund that. We're in a bargaining year. We don't know what the mandate is. There's too many variables. So I think you've done well with the variables, but I don't think we should stop advocating. And I think we just have to we have to work with our partners to maybe, what was that dystopia
Dystopia.
thing that you were talking about? To talk about this budget dystopia, because it's bothered me forever that we, they ask for a balanced budget, and balanced budgets, they don't give us enough money to balance the budget. Rant. I'll stop almost now. I think what we did today in finance and operations around really getting very, very detailed on the transportation stuff and on the meaning of funding protection, because the way that the media put it out is quite different from how it works. I think that kind of work is going to really benefit us well. To hear that how much our busing is costing us, that money could go to classrooms. This is, layoffs have happened to me in my career as an educator quite a few times. It hasn't happened in this district for many, many years. It predates me in this district. It's really, really hard for those people who lose their positions, even if they're assured that, by attrition, you'll get something in the fall or you'll get something by the fall. It's really tough out there right now. And I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that has gone into trying to keep as much support for our students as we can. So thank you. And I guess we'll just go on to the meeting and see what other people have to say. I'm hoping that maybe some of the parents will speak up, and some of the staff members that we have here. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go to Trustee Kellogg, and then Dr. Jory, and then back to you, Matt, because you've had a couple of questions already. So that's okay with you, Trustee Kellogg?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't know if a lot of people realize it, but the loss of the students in September, and Ron, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were no layoffs that resulted from that. There were just postings that were held back for that large amount of students that we lost last September. Is that correct?
There were 2 layoffs, I believe. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, there were 2 layoffs, one particularly out of the board office.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's a clarification for me, but I didn't think there was 20 students could result in a lot of staff being reduced, and that did not happen. Also, with the projections of enrollments, which results in less staff being hired, it ends up being, that we end up having cuts across the board. And I feel like I feel like this has actually been quite a thoughtful budget. I think it could have been much worse. I think there could have been more layoffs. And I think that most of the layoffs that are going to happen, or the positions that are going to be removed, are not going to affect the students as much as it could have been. I think it could have been much worse. So for that, Ron, I thank you. I know that we needed to have some cuts to resolve our budget shortfalls, so I appreciate that. I also wanted to say, up until the meeting that we went to last Wednesday, I didn't quite understand how useful NERT could be, but I heard a lot of conversations where schools are utilizing NERT, so and to their benefit, and they've loved it. So I've only ever heard really negative things come across about NERT, but I heard really positive things. So I would like to see what the result of that would be, but I feel much more in favor of the NERT program than I did last year, because I feel like I know a lot more about it now. So anyways, thank you, Ron, for the thoughtful budget.
Okay, I'm going to let Dr. Jory jump in, and then I'll return to Matt for questions, and then Jill, we'll see.
Yeah.
Dr. Jory.
Yeah, and thanks, Trustee Kellogg, for reminding us about the hardships of the fall, because they are kind of looming in the background. We went soft on staffing at the time because we were up and running and didn't want to impact classrooms, but some other things got hit a little harder. And now because of that, we're having to, find those things and kind of put them back in. To Secretary Treasurer Amos's point early on in this presentation, that low-hanging fruit over time has been some pressures. There has applied some pressure to us, and I'm speaking, of a number of things, but really the supply budgets are a place where we need to just put money back in, because they do change behavior at the school. They do take away options for kids. They do cause us to reach out to parents more, which is not to our liking. And so, restoring that money and rebuilding it relative to inflation, at least for the time being, seems to be very important. The cybersecurity piece cannot be ignored, and so those pressures are pressures that have been kind of looming over time. And of course, the charts and graphs tell the story of increased replacement costs and benefit costs. And, there's no funding for that. It's just another, million and a half that has to kind of come from everywhere. And we just have to deal with that. Then on top of that, we do have our dropping enrollment. Now, what we're hoping is, all these things are hitting at once, and this is why we have the big, this big challenge in front of us. What we're hoping is that if we deal with those other things and stabilize on those other things, then when we have, more down enrollment, we can deal with those things and on with a limited response, in that we have fewer kids, we'll have fewer students. We'll have fewer staff to teach and support those students. But I think Ron made the point, is every time you go up, you staff up accordingly, but there's this other layer that you can use to fund other supports and other programs. And when you're going down, you can reduce the amount of staffing because you have fewer kids, but you still have that layer that you have to reduce. And so that will be the challenge for us over the next couple of years for sure. However, if we do this thoughtfully, if we do this well, if we are firm in our choices this year, it should make it much more palatable over the next 2 years. And what we didn't want to do here is continue to kick the can down the road and have tough year, and still have all these things wanting in the system along the way. So that was the thinking in the room that generated that budget.
Thanks, Dr. Jory. Back to you, Matt. Additional questions?
Well, yeah, if there's other folks that want to jump in, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to, I guess, make sure my math is correct, because I want to keep this to question. But when you have 3 teachers and you have 90 students, it's 30 students per class. And if you have 4 teachers and 90 students, it's 23 students per class. And the idea of exploratories that looked at computers and digital literacy and arts and robotics and textiles and food programs and wood shops, those are key things, and those don't operate well with 30 students. They operate well with 23, and that was the idea behind that. So not empathizing with the decisions about where to cut corners, but students will be impacted, programs will be impacted by these decisions. And it's just unfortunate that benefits that are bargained in good faith are not funded at the local level, and that's a ministry thing. And yes, you folks here have to deal with those types of cuts, but really something that should be fully funded and not be on the backs of employees that bargain hard and work hard for the system. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Matt. Jill, I don't know, you had your hand up and down, but maybe things have progressed beyond where you'd like to have input. But I think we have a lot of information to take in. I don't see any more hands up for folks. Another chance for us to revisit this at our May 27th board meeting, integral part of that meeting as we go forward. But I think, as we know, we have not necessarily, we've asked more questions and things like that, and maybe had more things to think about after the 27th. We still are not required to pass a budget until June. The end of June, though, is the time frame that we're held to as far as the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So I'll call again. Are there any other questions of Mr. Amos? It's been a very thoughtful, and thank you very much to the executive leadership group for their work in this regard. It's not easy, and yes, I've been here 20 some odd years, and yes, we have not been to this place. We have been in funding protection before. We came out of funding protection and now it's going back in. So it's kind of like this cycle of life, you know, goes up and then it goes down and it goes, you know, along. And so we're trending, I think, over the big picture of things in the 10-year cycling of angst in our community as far as children, families, work, and a whole lot of other things. So seeing no further hands, and the next chance we have to meet up and discuss this is May 27th. I'll ask for a mover to adjourn the meeting, please. Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and we'll see you all next week for this. But tomorrow we might see you for CUPE Recognition Day, and our thanks to all our CUPE and support staff folks in the district. We have a special treat for you tomorrow. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Amos and the team, for setting us on a course for not easy decisions, but I think some stability. Good night.